today at our official third webinar in the Now Spoke series. We are so excited to have Alan Yu here to speak on his journey to product management. So I'm going to make this intro super quick so we can go ahead and get started. So my name is Ashley Williams. I am one of the co-founders at Now Spoke, and I wanted to give a quick introduction on who we are, and then like I said, we can jump into this webinar. So at Now Spoke, we are focused on creating professional and personal development content for youth and young professionals around the world. Now, we've done an entire webinar on our story and how we got to where we're at already. So if you want to check it out and get more information on that, feel free to visit our website. Now today, like I said, we're super excited to have Alan Yu on our platform, who's going to talk to you all about his journey into finding his path with product management. So in order to really get involved and engage with this webinar, I want to first start by showing you guys two key features that you can use, like I said, to get engaged in the webinar. So using the chat feature, we'd love for you guys to implement any comments or concerns that you have. And if you have questions throughout the webinar, I encourage you all to use the Q&A feature. So now with this Q&A feature, I ask that you populate any questions that come up as we're talking throughout this webinar, and we will have time allocated at the end to cover these questions. So without further ado, I'd love to pass the floor over to Alan Yu to spend the next moments speaking about his journey into product management. The floor is all yours, Alan.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, I think it's working. Thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar, especially on this beautiful Memorial Day weekend and on a Sunday. Props to all of you for making time to attend this. So I can sense your passion for coming to this kind of talk. So I'll make sure that you get something to take away after this talk that I share. This is a story that I love to share with all my mentees and the various initiatives I'm driving inside and outside of Microsoft. So I hope this is something that you all could relate to in some way. So just to start off, as I mentioned, my name is Alan Yu. I am a Seattle native, was born and raised here. All my colleges I attended, all my internships I've had, and my job, my only job, I guess, after college, has all been in Washington State. So I'm about as local as you can get. I attended the University of Washington, but didn't graduate from there. But I graduated from Seattle University with a computer science degree in 2017. And currently, I've been a Microsoft program manager too for the last almost 3 years. I joined Microsoft in July, so I'm almost at the 3-year mark, working in the Azure data team. And it's a job that I absolutely love. I feel like I just won the lottery in terms of the team that I've been able to the team members I've been able to work with, and also the product I get to work on as well. So I'll go into that a little bit more detail later on. But I just also want to share that my passion, if I had a kind of tagline of who Alan Yu is my passion is to help others grow. So having a platform like Now Spoke to kind of share my story here is something I'm really passionate about doing. So I hope this is something that you can all learn from. In terms of some goals, I just want to really make sure that you are aware that this time is for you. It's not for me to flex about anything that's gone in my life, and there's actually not that much to even flex about. And I also hope that you can learn at least one thing from this presentation a year from now. And I always like to start off my presentations that way, because if you go and dedicate 30 minutes, 45 minutes to a presentation, there's not really something actionable they could do afterwards. It's not really the best use of time, I would say. So I want you to try to think about what that one thing is and just write it down somewhere so that you don't forget a year from now. And hopefully it's not something you even have to write down. It's just I remember that line, and I'm going to just make this I'm going to save 2020 basically and make this a better year for your personal growth. In terms of some themes, as we think about the stories that I'm going to be sharing, is that these two sentences is something that really is something that I always reiterate with any of the mentees I've worked with in the past. And as someone who is a mentee and who has many mentors in my life, this first one about don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness, I hear it from every single mentor, and from any PM mentor that you may be facing in your career, or just even any mentor in general. I found that this line was very empowering to me. Growing up in a culture where it's very rules-based and discipline and those type of things, it was very freeing to be able to hear this sentence and be able to share this with anyone else, because I found this was how I was able to make an impact really quickly at Microsoft and also just really take the reins in my career. Um, so I think that's a really good takeaway that you should consider. Another one is actually pretty fitting, considering that Avatar: The Last Airbender is now on Netflix these days, so you can go ahead and watch the whole series. I think it's the best show, like animated series, period. But anyway, so pride is not the opposite of shame, but its source. True humility is the only antidote to shame. And this is the thing about having an ego, and I feel like that's something that definitely, like, anything to protect my ego was certainly it's not really a sign of a growth mindset, and that's something that I struggled with very on in my college years, of embracing this person who was super successful in high school and growing up and had all the recipe to succeed, but ultimately went through a lot of failures to kind of get to this point. So just wanted to make that clear. So yeah, I think to kind of start off this story, let's go back to basically being a senior in high school. And as I kind of hinted to earlier, I grew up in an environment where it's basically like an Asian culture, where you want to be very successful, make sure your grades are very good, and those type of things. But very much, as much as it was a benefit to have such caring parents, at the same time, I wasn't really forming opinions by myself. So, one thing that was always hashed on me was be a doctor, be a doctor, be a doctor. So the only thing that, if you thought about who I was back in senior high school, this was literally all I cared about. Like, I would sacrifice a lot of social activities so that I could be taking like more advanced classes and those type of things, and whatever would help me basically get set up for medical school one day. And, if you were to ask me, like, why do you want to be a doctor? I would probably make up some reason about anything that's not about like making lots of money or making my parents proud of me. But reflecting back on it, I didn't really know why I wanted to be a doctor, and that's something I feel like a lot of people struggle with as they go and navigate through college, and even after graduation in college, that they don't really know why they are on this certain path. Whether it's something that their parents told them that it was a path to success, or that they saw their friends and all their friends are doing this certain thing and they found success that way. But it's something that can lead to a lot of trouble if you don't handle it the right way. So when I first started into college, it was actually a very exciting time. Found a lot of early success early on. I immediately joined the research lab. I got accepted to this top 10 in the nation bioengineering program at the University of Washington. Got a publication out of it very early on. I took so many advanced classes just due to my IB credits and whatnot. So I was taking like 3 sciences and even a math class as well. So it was a time that was very hectic for me. But I felt like this was the only path to success, and my only career path was to be a doctor, because that's what everyone told me growing up. One thing that's kind of underrated during this time was I started to understand the value of building a community, but I always used it as something that was kind of on the back burner. So I did things like build a mentorship program for the bioengineering organization, but it was something that I didn't really feel it was like a really big priority for me at the time, but that changed over time. So long story short about bioengineering, and as a disclaimer, it's a really amazing program if you are passionate about bioengineering and that's like what you want to do. But for me, it was just not for me. I hated it, in fact. I hated organic chemistry. Every class was stressing me out. This kind of image of this kind of perfect high school student that I was, kind of that image just got shattered because my GPA was like, I struggled to get even above a 3.0 in many classes at the time. And, just over those 2.5 years of basically going through that program and trying to make it work, I realized, if I continue down this path, I'm going to just lead to a life of unhappiness, because it was something that I wasn't super passionate about. So, all these activities kind of led to what I view as my rock bottom. If you view like your life as a sinusoidal curve of like ups and downs in life, this was literally my rock bottom. So in my junior year, my fall quarter, I skipped many classes. It was such a really tough time for me. Diagnosed with major depression disorder as well, and I was just totally lost. I did not know what to do with my life at that point. I needed to basically do a full reset and think about things that made me happy and figure out how do I really proceed from this. And I feel like this is something that just how like math works is that everyone has some theoretical rock bottom, right? But it's a time that it's a very trying time because it depends on how you respond to it that could kind of dictate how the next few years are going to go. And for me, like at the beginning, it was kind of a struggle. It was mostly like self-care and those type of things. But ultimately, I think I did find a path that seemed to work out for me. So this was back in 2013, actually. But I kind of had to do this reflection where I was only taking one class at the time at the University of Washington. I was just a part-time student. But first of all, to talk about some of my emotions at the time, I was super embarrassed. I had this ego in myself shattered. Like I didn't even want to see people for a very long time. I didn't reach out to friends for a very long time. But I went to a coffee shop every day to figure some things out. There's like a local Starbucks here. Just went there and just went online and just did some Google searching and stuff. I think I did like a personality test even just to try that out. And at the same time, I was also doing a decent amount of streaming on twitch.tv. And it was actually a pretty interesting time because I got to meet a lot of diverse people around the world that I normally wouldn't meet. Got to meet people like developers in New Zealand, in Japan, in Germany, and all across the United States, all from different backgrounds, all there from whatever reason that they ended up on twitch.tv. And it was from there that I kind of started to realize that I loved community building. I really liked the opportunities to do some side projects. Like they would pull me aside to ask me if I wanted to create like a twitch.tv chatbot for my channel, and they would teach it in like MIRC or in Python. And that's kind of where I started to like realize that this is something I might be interested in. But I also did a reflection about the past classes I took in bioengineering, and I loved my math classes, and I loved my problem, like this idea of solving problems. And that's when I started to decided I wanted to take this risk and take computer science at the time, which was considered a big risk for the bioengineering students because we struggled a lot with computer science. University of Washington has a reputation of having a very difficult computer science intro class. But I took a risk. I ended up taking it, and I did decent in it. I got 3.3 in it, but I knew from that point on, regardless of GPA, regardless of all the past transgressions that happened in life, computer science was the path forward for me. Even after I decided computer science was my major, I still ran into some obstacles. Like I applied to 5 other majors at the University of Washington and got rejected by all 5. So I had to make this really difficult decision to leave University of Washington, where many of my family were alumni before, and instead join Seattle University, just because I knew I wanted to study computer science. And I ran into another thing where like transfer credits didn't really work out. So then I had to take an extra year at a private university, which means extra year tuition at a private university cost, not getting like the in-state tuition that you get at University of Washington. So it was a really big risk for me at the time, but I knew I had to take this risk. And one thing that was really great about Seattle University was like, even though I had to take that extra year and I wasn't really taking that many computer sciences classes in that first year, it was an opportunity for me to kind of open my mind. Very much I was kind of this person who, once I set a goal, I was so narrow-minded at just trying to achieve that one goal. I didn't really take, like if I saw another class on like theater, I would think it's a waste of time. Why would I take a class on that? But as it turns out, Seattle University had a requirement as a liberal arts college to take a bunch of these classes. So I ended up taking ethics, I took philosophy, I took theater, I took women and children violence, I took social justice, I think theology also, I took that class as well. And man, that just opened my eyes to like so many other people that, I originally didn't really, I didn't really have many friends that, went through a lot of struggles for some of these classes that I was learning from. And it really just opened my eyes about, viewing tech as not just this place where I'm going to go and become a software engineer and work all day on code type of things. But there's a really real opportunity for me to add value, not just from coding. And think about that deep empathy. And that's something that is a theme that I find when I look at PMs who are first joining in as a PM. When you look at great PMs versus average PMs, is those who can empathize with people and understand people from diverse backgrounds is going to take you so far. When you think about the different customers using your product, like for example, you think about Visual Studio Code and all the different people that may be potentially using that piece of software, man, you got to understand all the different users and use cases coming for that to be successful. So anyways, I would say that even though a lot of people and even past Alan might have viewed that year as a total waste of time, for me, like I needed that year to learn to forgive myself. That was what I learned from one of the theology classes in there, from things that happened in the past. But it really ultimately helped me move on so that I could start focusing on being razor sharp in terms of getting a PM position, or at least getting a job in tech at the time. Cool. So around that first year, I also decided that, man, I needed to get an internship, because if you want to get a job, you need to get an internship, and otherwise it just becomes a lot more difficult. So in the past, when I applied to bioengineering internships, I always got rejected. And I thought that I was just really bad at applying places. I think I applied to 10 companies per year throughout being a bioengineering student. I got rejected by all 10. So I thought I was a failure. Boy, was I wrong. So in terms of what it looked like, I decided that, I'm going to forget about all the rejection emails I get, or all the no responses I get, which I'm sure many of you have experienced in the past. But I said, you know what, in this winter break, I'm going to apply until I get an offer. No more shame. I'm just going to keep applying to places. And over a 5-month period, from January until May, I applied to 100 different companies. And it was an arduous process. I was taking a bunch of classes at the time, and trying to figure out what does it take to get accepted to an internship. I did find that after viewing some things like some subreddits that I was looking at, and just talking with some other professors and friends, that I needed to treat my resume as like a piece of software and constantly be iterating on it. So every time I would treat it like different batches of like 5 to 10 that I apply each time, try to get some feedback. If I get a rejection, I emailed the recruiter and asked them for feedback about areas that I can improve for the next application that I do. And over time, that first resume I submitted just got so much better by the time 5 months passed around, that it was starting to look like an actually decent resume. When I was applying to these different places, I applied through Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, and my Career Center. And I just tried anywhere, honestly. Like wherever that there was an opening, I just applied and just didn't care. Another piece of advice here that I like to share all the time whenever I do UW outreach programs is to ignore any of the job description stuff about needing 5 years of some framework or those type of things. In general, those are wish list items. Just apply anyways. Don't remove yourself from the process without even trying to apply, because there may be an opportunity for you as in a junior role that might not just have a job listing out there. But anyways, to kind of get to the point on this, after applying to 100 companies, I got one offer, and it was an offer that I loved. I got to this tree company, a tree harvesting company, to do IT, build IT apps basically at a company called Warehouser. And for many people, for their first internship, they ideally want to have Microsoft or Google and those type of places. But for me, this company was really good for me to kind of get my feet in the door, understand what it's like to work a 40-hour week job for the first time, and also just learn what real code looks like, as opposed to just things that I learned in my classroom. So yeah, that's where I get started as a software engineering intern at Warehouser. So after that first year, I found myself my brain kind of hurt a lot after looking at code all day. And as much as I enjoyed taking the requirements coming from the PMs I was working with and my mentor that I had, I don't know, it was just, I didn't feel super excited about doing the coding that I was doing, but maybe it was just I wanted to do something that was more customer facing at the time. So when I was applying in the next internship cycle for the following summer, I kind of had an idea what I want to do now. So I applied much earlier to these companies instead of waiting until winter break. I applied to 50 companies this time. And I got a much better interview rate. I think I got about 20 companies offered interviews at that time, just because I had that one internship, and including one company called Microsoft. And I was so excited, because this is a company that I used to go on Fridays to chess Fridays, and this math competition held at Microsoft type of thing. And it's a company that you see people and your family members and friends are using Microsoft products all the time. So I was like, I got to be super focused and get ready for this interview. And by the way, after I submitted my initial application to Microsoft, um, I changed my resume 15 times just because of the other 50 applications I did to make sure that was up to date for any of the reviewers at that point. So I made it to the on-site. The phone interview was kind of interesting, but let's skip to on-site. That's kind of where the turning point happened for me. Because for me, I only viewed software engineering as the only route for me. I had no idea the PM route existed. But the very first interviewer I had actually asked me at the time, Alan, for your technical question, how would you cure Ebola? And can you go on the whiteboard and show me how to do that? And it's kind of ironic now that I bring up this story, just given the current situation going on. But this was a big deal at the time. I think this was late 2015. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong. But when I did this interview, it was total shock to me. For someone that was doing like lots of leak code and cracking the coding interview to be asked this kind of question, I wasn't really ready. So I just had to come up with some answer. I drew a bunch of diagrams on the whiteboard and always ask questions. And I felt like that was something that my interviewer appreciated a lot. Just being able to make sure I gathered the requirements, walk through some different edge cases, and I basically drew a map of the world at the time. But I think I've left a pretty strong impression on this interviewer. The other three interviewers were all generic coding questions. One of them was actually a really difficult natural language processing question, which probably shouldn't be asked to an intern. But anyways, I did not do well on that question. But at the end of it, they actually offered me a PM internship at Microsoft. And for me, I just heard that and I was like, I don't care what that is. It's at Microsoft. I'm going to accept it and go learn whatever this role is. So, I was like, it was kind of a mystery to me. In my classes, I tried to figure out oh, there's this PM role that kind of defines requirements and doesn't do too much code, but they're there to kind of, talk with customers, gather requirements, and engineers will go build something afterwards. But man, that was a big oversimplification. So I did that internship, best internship experience that I could ask for. Microsoft interns, they just know how to spoil them. But at that point, I knew that this was the role that was really calling for me. When I reflected back at University of Washington, I loved building communities. When I reflected back to those classes I was taking at Seattle University and kind of opening the world to me and really build that sense of empathy and understanding users and customers and those type of things, that's when it kind of light bulb just hit me. I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So it was at that point where I really wanted to push for that return offer at Microsoft and be a PM. And even after accepting that PM offer, I actually got a phone call later, and they asked me during the middle, right before I was about to start, whether I wanted to switch to be an engineer instead. So then suddenly I had a life crisis again. I was like, oh shoot, maybe I should be an engineer first and then be a PM a few years later after that. But I turned that down because I knew this is where I was going to be happy. I was done doing things that made me unhappy, or at least if I knew something made me happy, I just had to pursue it. So ultimately, I chose PM. And I actually had to move from the initial intern team. And as much as I love the people on that team, I knew that working on a product that was customer facing was where I could really excel and drive value for the company. So that's where I got to work on Azure Data Studio back when it was in this private preview state. No one in the public was allowed to know what the name of the project was at the time. And now taking it to GA and presenting at Microsoft Ignite and all those wonderful things. So, that was kind of goes back to one of my themes about when you have an opportunity to do something that you're passionate about, don't wait for permission from your recruiter or from your manager at the time to tell you whether it's the right time for you to go move teams or change your offer, those type of things. You really just have to go do it. My recruiter at the time was really against me moving teams. And for me, I just constantly said I wanted to move to this new team. And eventually I ended up getting a phone interview from that team, and they accepted me with wide open arms, joined it, and have been loving it ever since. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into an entry-level PM position at Microsoft, just from the grind that it takes from getting those 2 internships. I had a software engineering intern at T-Mobile in my senior year just to get some extra cash to help pay off the tuition, but also to just make double sure that I wanted to be a PM instead of software engineer. So I was still going through that little back and forth in my head. But I've decided that this is the path for me. Just checking on time really quick. Okay. So what do I do as a PM? So I build cross-platform and open source tools for customers who work with databases. Particularly like Azure Data Studio is all on GitHub. So you could literally just go on, github.com/Microsoft/Azure Data Studio, and you can see all the source code right out there in the open. And it's just super amazing to work at this company at like Microsoft, who used to hate work, like used to say only Windows, 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 and closed source, closed source, closed source. But now I'm working on the team who works on like Mac OS and Linux experiences while also doing everything in open source. So it's just crazy how the world has changed over a long time. One of my other jobs is to make sure that we're answering the what and why. And that's part of like, we're kind of doing the semester planning right now, where we define from like June to December and then January till June, to figure out like what should engineers be building and why? Like what is the business impact? What's the revenue dollars that we'll be making by doing these different things? So there's a lot of, customer empathy, as I mentioned. You have to understand who our customers are, have to figure out where's the next step in terms of like tech initiatives, go to conferences, understand what's new and budding, and work with Microsoft research and find ways how we can take that technology into our user interfaces. It's just so fun, to go work with all these different partner teams. Another thing is that I work with so many different people. So that's why I say empathy is so important. I work with people not just in Redmond, but all across the United States and China and Europe. Work with PMs, engineering, designers, marketing, finance, legal, content, social, support, field, and evangelists. And that's just you could just imagine what my Outlook inbox looks like these days in terms of all the different emails that I get. And sometimes here I'll have like a logo discussion for 2 hours. And then over here, I'm just talking about customer documentation for like 3 hours. So it's, you have to just keep putting on these different hats and know how to talk with these different people so you can help them be successful and get their job done. And then you have to make sure you're looking at the whole success of the project, and not just, that requires saying no to certain things, which is super hard to do, because there are super enthusiastic people out there, but that's just something you have to do. But in addition to that, I don't want to go too deep into this story, but maybe this is for a future thing, or you can reach out to me afterwards, is that, once you work in the corporate world for a while, and this was even just for like a year or two for me, is that you can find yourself getting lost with just like the constant, cycles of, the annual review process and the product lifecycle process kind of things, where you kind of get just stuck in a rhythm where you're just like, work, eat, exercise, sleep, and then you just do that every single day. And then you're like, when I kind of think about like 30 years from now, what is the impact I want to leave on the earth one day? And that's when I started to realize I need to make some time to do things I was passionate about. And going back to my introduction, I'm passionate about helping other people grow. So for me, I do a bunch of mentoring on the side. I have a bunch of mentees that I do regular one-on-ones with. Last summer, I mentored 20 interns, and they ended up all of them got 20 return offers. So that pumped me up last year. 2019 was one of my best years of my life, just to say that. I build communities. I do a lot of things with new employee orientation, the LEAP Engineering Apprenticeship Program, which is focusing on hiring diverse talent. I am on the Asian ERG and the Korean Diversity Board and driving initiatives through there. But ultimately, due to the skills that I'm doing with my work, it's easy to translate to go drive these initiatives outside and inside of Microsoft as well. So, once you find what your passion is, I really encourage you to go just, focus on that, go find success, and figure out how do you make an impact on others and not just on your personal growth. So, there you go. This is, if you want to take a quick screenshot of this, I don't want to go too much into detail, but this is kind of the framework that I share with any of my mentees or any college students of what it takes, even very early on in your college planning, to kind of set yourself up for a good job after graduation. And, it's a very difficult time right now, but if there isn't a crisis going on right now, this is a typical thing that I always give people the same framework. So yeah, that's kind of a quick summary of just things that happened on my journey. I know it's a little bit fast in terms of what I actually do as a PM, but I'm happy to answer those in the Q&A part. But I want you to kind of just take this moment to reflect and think about the themes that I mentioned before about don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness, but also that part about ego. So, in the past, I was very, took all my failures, I kind of hid them from people because I didn't want people to know about like, my lower GPA or any of those kind of things. But as it turns out, I kind of I talk about that very openly right now. I go talk to my high schools, I talk with college students and mentees. I just tell them openly, hey, this is what I had to do, and this is what it took, right? So I got rejected by all East Coast universities back in high school. I left bioengineering at the University of Washington, which was super embarrassing to me at the time. Had major depression disorder, which again, people don't like to share that kind of thing openly to people. Um, Although it's the stigma, I guess, is starting to improve, which I love, and our leadership even at Microsoft has had very open dialogues about it since this is Mental Health Awareness Month. I got rejected by 5 other majors at University of Washington, super embarrassing, rejected by more than 100 companies, and took me 6 years to graduate undergrad. So another way to frame this, and as a PM, you should learn how to frame things. Even if things sound bad, you should learn to frame it properly so that you're focused on the actual, like, what you takeaways from things. These are the steps I had to take in order to reach this point as being a PM at Microsoft. I had to get rejected by all these East Coast universities to get at University of Washington. I had to leave bioengineering. I had to leave University of Washington so that I could go to Seattle University and take all these additional classes that opened my mind to learn to work with so many different people. I had to get major depression disorder so that I could learn to accept that it's okay to not be okay. I think I'm saying that right. But to also embrace that I hit my rock bottom, and that's when you're open to the greatest change. I think that's actually a Legend of Korra reference, if any of you are watching that. Yeah, but each of these were steps that I had to reach so that I could reach this point where I'm in my zone. I found my passion, I found my success, and I'm still moving towards a lot of goals that I'm trying to do in my career at this point. So if we kind of sum up the takeaways here, I guess I'm throwing a lot, but I'm hoping at least one of them will land with you so that, one of the goals I mentioned was 1 year from now, you can still remember one of these things. Your GPA, your college reputation, like what college you went to or graduated from, reputation of your major, doesn't matter. Finding your passion matters, and that's how you're going to find success. Purpose of college is learn how to learn. It's not about the reputation of your alumni, but it's there so you can learn how to learn properly and be a lifelong learner. Anyone that joins a new company like Microsoft has to start from ground zero. It doesn't matter any of the GPA you had before. You have to learn again how to be contributing for the next 30 years of your life, or 30, 40 years. Embrace failure as a part of the learning process. Everyone has their own timeline. If you're not failing, you're not challenging yourself enough. So I encourage you to embrace it. Make friends with people, make friends with partners that you work with on your teams. Don't take them for granted. Don't make them respond to emails over the weekends or anything crazy like that. Make friends, build empathy wherever you go. There's always something to learn from other people. Take care of yourself. I actually lead an investment club at Microsoft, and not the main investment club, but I lead one as kind of a smaller focus group. And I always start every presentation saying, make sure to take care of yourself, mentally, physically, socially. Make sure those are met before you do anything else. So make sure you're doing that and not sacrificing it on this journey to being a PM. And try to have fun with it too. It's just too much of a slog if you're going through all these different rejections and you're not having fun along the way. So I encourage you to do so. And with that, are there any questions?
Thank you, Alan. That was absolutely amazing. We do have questions here. And again, I want to encourage people, if you have questions, keep populating them into that Q&A tool, but we will start going through the ones that we have. So the first one is, when thinking about program management versus other technical roles, what made you choose the PM route over software development?
That is the money question, isn't it? It's something that I struggled with for a long time, believe me. Even after I accepted that return offer to Microsoft, I was still thinking, like, did I make the right decision or not? And when I received that phone call 2 months before I started at Microsoft asking if I wanted to be an engineer instead, I realized I wasn't really, like, the original plan. I thought that I was totally focused on being a PM, just suddenly oh shoot, I'm on the fence again. Ultimately for me, it's really about where you are being evaluated for. And it's being also where do you want the majority of your time spent, and priorities and those type of things. And for me, coding is super important. That's what allows for many companies to even have companies in the first place. But I didn't feel like that's where I ultimately would be able to drive value. I found that I think many other people are just so much more proficient at coding than me. that I felt like where I'm really going to be able to drive value is from the deep empathy and looking at the big picture, thinking about how different teams will work together or the different customers work with the product, and providing that value to the engineers is something that I could make a career out of that kind of thing. Because that's something that I'm good at. And when I think about engineering or I think about coding, uh, I love it actually. I love problem solving. That's something that I don't want to lose my coding skills at any point. But I would rather be spending the time, talking with customers, working with internal teams, and things like even as simple as like what should our logo be, or what should be the name of our product, type of things, so that it appeals to, or even accessibility. Make sure that our product is usable by all these people. That is something that aligns with my passions about helping other people grow, while also making sure that I'm still doing like highly technical things too. So that's kind of between PM and engineering. And other roles I feel like is starting to get a little bit too far away from engineering, and I don't want to be too far away from the technical side. So I feel like PM just has that perfect balance to work on so many different things. And sometimes in a week I decide like I don't want to write specs this whole week, so I'm going to go work on something else and train a different part of the brain there.
Got it. Great. Thank you. The next question is, as a student who is graduating this year with little to no tech experience, is it too late to pursue a PM role?
Gosh, I first want to let anyone know who's graduating this year, man, this is like such a difficult time. So, uh, I can't pretend that I understand what it's like to kind of go through this kind of a job search process. That simply wouldn't give you justice for all the struggles that you all had to go through this year, and going through the adjustments of virtual. Like one piece of advice that I received, as even at Microsoft, that a PM pulled me aside and told me, what you're going through right now is not work from home, it's work from crisis. So I want to really make sure that you're in a very unique scenario. So what I would, in terms of advice that I share here, is something that is like a general principle, but it may not be the perfect solution for you, just given the current situation. Um, but in general, what I would say is that whenever you ask yourself the question whether this is the right time to apply or not, that's the time to apply. And the reason I give that advice is that you just never know when there's an opportunity for you that might open up. And the only way to have that opportunity is to try, right? It's like there's that, what's the right word for that? Cliche that, if you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? You have to apply to these places, or you have to go look at different opportunities like the LEAP. Suggest any of you to go Google the LEAP apprenticeship program at Microsoft. It's a great way to, for those of you who don't have like a computer science degree, to transition to a tech role. And I'm actually one of the teachers for it. So I highly encourage you to look into that. But you just never know. So my sister got an internship actually, and she was breaking into the design process, where I kind of told her my story too. I said, you need to apply like 100 companies, keep applying even if you get rejections. And she got an internship offer in July. Late July, she got an internship for the summer. So if that doesn't show you like it's too late to get an internship, I don't know what does. So I encourage you that whenever you ask the question, if this is the right time, it's the right time. Don't wait for that, like, you're waiting to put a hackathon in your resume type of things. You can always update your resume. In my Microsoft example, I updated my resume 15 times before they ended up accepting me for the next round. So make sure that you are, taking advantage of any opportunities you can see.
Got it. Thank you. So the next one is, as a person who also suffers from severe depression on and off again, she wanted to thank you a lot for being very open about your struggle as well. And the two questions here are, number one, if I'm interested in becoming a PM that worked closer to users, are there certain parts of Microsoft I should apply to? I've really fallen in love with UX research, and I would love to interact with the customer as much as possible, and working at Microsoft would be incredible.
Yeah, honestly, like for those of you, like if you want to set some kind of goal, like I could really realistically view myself working at Microsoft for the rest of my life, or at least until Satya leaves as CEO. Like Satya just does an awesome job as in terms of the vision of Microsoft here. But sorry, I'm giving all these like kind of side notes, but I would say It's an interesting point you bring up UX research because I'm very involved as a front end PM for the most part, involved with UX research. I also know like the dev div is what we call them, but they work on tools like Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code. They have this huge like testing lab where they like can view participants behind a screen and take notes of people actually trying out Visual Studio. So the question here for you might be, do you want to be a PM or do you want to be a UX researcher or a UX designer even? And that opens a whole nother realm of possibilities. The UX researcher role at Microsoft is one of the best defined UX research roles I've ever seen. And I work with UX researchers all the time. And frankly, I can't do my job well without UX researchers. So if that's something you're passionate about, it's a potential route if you want to consider that. But as a PM, if you're thinking like UX PM is what you want to do, and I don't want to scare you away from that role, think about Microsoft products that you use all the time. Think about Microsoft Teams, think about Excel, think about Visual Studio Code, think about any of the open source software we're using, Windows apps, and just really deep dive into those tools and look at the product blogs out there. See who are the PMs that are writing about all the releases and those type of things. Add them on LinkedIn, add them for coffee, and just kind of understand what the culture of that team looks like. Because that's honestly, if you want to work on a team that's user facing, like maybe you could even ask some of your family members or your friends, what tools do they use, and figure out like what are their pain points. And then when you go into that interview for that team, and they're like, man, my mom has so much struggle with Microsoft Excel. Why can't we just make this experience easier? That is how you kind of shine in that interview, where you are showing that deep customer empathy in the interview. So that's why I encourage you to do is like really think about the Microsoft products used in the past. Think about some of them that you're surprised that are even Microsoft products, like LinkedIn and GitHub, for example. Now that we acquired them, they're technically Microsoft products now too. So that's my suggestion in terms of UX research and finding a product team like that. There's tons of roles like that.
Got it. Okay. So I'm going to hop around a bit just to make sure that we cover at least one of everyone's questions. I know we're
Sure.
on time. And like I put in the chat, everyone, we are planning to go over a bit more so we can cover questions. So feel free to stick around. But the next question is, hi, Alan. First, thank you for sharing your journey. It really resonated with me. I have a question about your role as a PM. How much of your role requires a technical background?
Gotcha. So it's actually an interesting thing. So originally, like my org is called Azure Data, and kind of the sub-organization is more like SQL Server. It's kind of what it's kind of known for. And it's this robust database we've had for a very long time, very popular. Many like hospitals and banks are using SQL Server today. And the kind of expectation that people feel like in this deeply technical product is that you need to have all this like deep database knowledge and B tables and all these type of things, right? But as it turns out, when you talk with a lot of the PMs there and how our high functioning PM team is doing, we have about like 30 to 40 PMs now in what is constituted as a SQL Server organization. I think it's about half came from like not necessarily a database background even, and the other half are deep, like they worked in support before or were working in some of the organizations that specialize in SQL Server. But certainly you don't have a hard requirement that you need to be super deep into that product in order to be successful and in order to drive value. It's good to have a baseline as understanding computer science as a whole and having a passion for technology. And as long as you have that passion there to go learn about these things, read documentation, do trainings, ask for help, or even go out to customers, and don't be afraid to ask them really dumb questions. You can find a way to be successful that way. And when you look at people who kind of grew in this organization, many of these people weren't experts in SQL. So I would say it's not a prerequisite at all. It's really having that hunger to go learn, to really put in that time to understand what a customer's pain looks like, and then going back to the empathy component. Can you empathize with people? Can you empathize with customers or ask the right questions so that you can properly provide those requirements to the team? If anything, I feel like communication, essentially, if you can be a strong communicator and have at least a decent understanding of tech in general and willing to spend that time to learn tech, you can be successful on this team, no problem. My manager actually has a very unique hiring style in terms of the people that she's looking for. And there's no hard requirement on there that you need like X plus years in C++ or whatever, or TypeScript or anything. It's really like, I think she tweeted about it. She was like, can you contribute to the culture of our team and help others feel safe and those type of things. So that it's kind of amazing to hear. That's like what a hiring manager is looking for. It's almost refreshing even to hear that, as opposed to seeing the typical heartless 5 years you need of X technology or whatever. So again, it goes back to the previous person's question, like when is the right time to apply? Just apply. If you see an opportunity that you like, just apply. Let them eliminate you. Don't eliminate yourself beforehand.
Yeah, that's great feedback. So perfect segue into this next question, actually. So this person says, during the part of applying to internships, you mentioned to ignore the qualifications and to apply anyway. Does this include GPA? There is a virtual event for a large company coming up, but requires for the intended audience to have a certain GPA. Should I still attend even if I don't have that GPA they are looking for?
I guess a caveat or a follow-up question to that is, well, okay, first of all, to be very direct, yes. Just, if there's like some kind of sign-up thing, just sign up anyways. If there's a spot for like attachments or something, you can include a cover letter or a little blurb or just email them saying like, I want to be very transparent with you. This is my GPA, but these are my experiences and what I'm passionate about and why I really want to attend this. And you'll be surprised how simple an email is. Back in college in Seattle University, you'd be surprised to hear this. People ask me to write the emails for them to companies and for even professors, even to ask a professor for a simple thing. They asked me to write their email because they were just so scared to write a simple email. And you'd be surprised how a simple email or a simple communication or a LinkedIn message can kind of open doors for you. So I would say, like, even though they kind of draw that line, like fundamentally, if I go up to them and ask them, why did you set that GPA thing? Like if I set up a hiring event from Microsoft, right? I'm very deep with planning and outreach type of things. If a recruiter set that as kind of a GPA bar, and I ask them, why did we set that GPA bar? I feel like they can't give me a good answer for that. Is this, 2.9 student going to not be able to be a good PM on our team? I don't think so. Frankly, GPA doesn't matter to me because, as I mentioned before, once you enter a job first time, like let's say the top Ivy League grad and the person who graduated from community college are both in the same job at Microsoft in the same PM role. Doesn't matter what your background is. It's about, can you capture customer requirements and make sure you're making business impact. At that point, we're all on the same page. So GPA, make your case, go send that email, and don't be afraid if they say no, don't even talk to me again. Because it's like, okay, that person's a jerk. I know not to apply to that kind of thing again. So
Yeah.
that's my advice.
Great. So we'll make this the last question, and I think it's a good one to end on. But again, I encourage you all, if you do have follow-up questions that are a bit more specific or you want to get more information, definitely reach out to Alan. We will include his contact info in the follow-up email. But this last question is, my dream is to be a PM. What 3 skills do you recommend I build as a student to land that dream PM role?
Okay. Yeah. So that's a great question. So just to finish the last question, goes back to the previous thing. Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness, right? Exact same thing you could apply for that previous question. For this one, number 1 is empathy. How do you build empathy is the following question. That's, do things that make you uncomfortable. I mean, that sounds kind of bad, but the reason why I frame it that way is that if you only put yourself in an environment where you're going to be successful, you're not really setting yourself up to go learn and fail and do those type of things. For me, growing up, I was so afraid of failure, of getting punished or being disciplined or get my video game time removed because I, missed 1 on the spelling test or something crazy like that. That kind of made me only want to do things I was good at. And that hurt me in the long run. Like now I'm starting to open up and go try different things. But, for me, when I had that super narrow-minded or fixed mindset of only taking like hard science classes, that prevented me to go learn about women and children violence, social justice, and all those other really great classes that I just had to take to go learn about those things. So I would say in order to build empathy, you should take classes that you may not necessarily feel like is totally related to your major or whatnot. But it's also to try to go meet people too. It's not just about learning about different cultures, but to actually go there. So if you can and you have the luxury to go travel the world, I highly encourage you to go do that. But you don't even have to travel far to do this. Like think about any diverse organizations in your college, university, or in your local area that you could think of ways to go participate there. And that's just, when you saw that list of all the different organizations or different partner teams I work with, there's people all over the spectrum. So I encourage you to go build that empathy and make that your focus, because naturally you're going to learn, you're going to make a lot of friends that way. You're going to have a lot more fun, and you're going to make a lot more impact as a PM. Number two is communication. And it's always overrated because everyone says like, oh, I could write an email. Email is easy. But when you actually look at the details, or you tell someone else, can you review my email, which I don't think anyone does. But if I review someone's email, I can tell right away what's missing. Like you're either writing too much, or you're missing the main details, you're not doing the right introductions, or you don't know how to craft the email depending on your audience as well. And as someone who almost became an English major, know your audience is so important when you're crafting these kind of communication things. And that's just email. Now you're thinking about how do you conduct yourself in meetings? How do you conduct yourself in virtual meetings? How do you conduct yourself in hallway conversations, right? Communication is where you need to kind of strive here. And for many of you, you might be wondering like, oh, Alan's super enthusiastic. You talk about such open things, but naturally I'm very introverted. I need to be at home in my bed at the end of the day and just recharge and be like, oh, I need to be away from people for a long time, right? But in the moment, I really do work on my communication skills a lot. I do reread my emails a lot and look back at past emails and been like, man, I could have cut out like 5 sentences there and try to remember that next time. But yeah, you could do that. You could do that starting now. Think about the email you send to your friends, to family, to professors, and to recruiters, and make sure you're treating recruiters like hiring managers. Basically, they're not someone that you should take for granted. Or treat them if they're not technical or whatnot, or disrespect them. They are going to be the ones who get you through the door. So make sure you're communicating properly there. And the third one is work on those technical skills. So as much as I am putting this emphasis on like the non-technical side, do think about taking those computer science classes so that you are you can form an opinion about what technology is the next thing we need to talk about, whether it's like Docker or Kubernetes or data science or machine learning. Like have that hunger to go try out these classes, even though that professor might have a reputation of, oh, they're super harsh and tough grader type of thing. Don't worry about that. Use it as an opportunity to go put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and go learn and grow, whether it's compilers or whatever, assembly language even. I had to take a class on that. But yeah, it goes back to those 3 things: empathy, communication, and technology skills. Don't you don't necessarily have to be an expert in coding, but you should be able to have a technical conversation with any of the customers that you work with and internal partners as well.
That is great. Thank you so much. This was absolutely amazing. And I think I am speaking for everyone when I say this was very helpful. So again, thank you, Alan, for taking the time to join us on our platform. For everyone that joined the conversation, thank you for your involvement. Thank you for your engagement. So we have 3 things that we want to end this webinar on. 1, if you aren't following us already on social media, please take the time to do so. We put up all of our updates as well as any content we have relating to our webinars. It'll also allow you to stay tuned for what we have coming up next. 2, we encourage you all to share what you learned today to your platform. And the reason being is because we want this content to go beyond just the people that attended and allow those that didn't have the chance to attend or had no idea Alan was going to be here today to reap the benefits for the valuable lessons that he just provided everyone. So if you do share us, feel free to tag us at NowSpoke or use our hashtag. But again, we just encourage you to share what you learn, whether it's on your social media or even just texting a friend. Spread the information. And the third thing is that we'll be sending out a post-webinar survey. This allows us to get information on how we can improve, as well as things that you enjoyed about this webinar. So those are the 3 call to actions we have for you all. Again, thank you for joining. And more importantly, thank you, Alan, for taking the time to join our platform. And we hope that you all enjoy the remainder of your day. And again, thank you. And that is it for today. Alan, did you have any last closing words before we hop off?
I probably talked too much, but thank you for the opportunity. Thank you again to everyone for taking this time in your Memorial Day weekend to listen. I encourage you to make the most of your Memorial Day weekend, and get some time to relax after this very difficult time. And yeah, I thank you so much. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. So best of
Yep.
luck with your PM journey.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. And again, we'll be sending out Alan's info so you can reach out to him directly. But bye, everyone. Thank you.